It was an ordinary evening when Emily received the letter. She had never heard of Shadow House before, yet the letter was addressed to her, inviting her to spend a weekend there. The invitation was strange, no sender, just a promise of a substantial reward for anyone who could spend 3 nights in the house. Emily, intrigued by the challenge and the promised reward, decided to go. After all, how scary could an old house be? As Emily packed her bags, she couldn't shake off a growing sense of dread, but she brushed it aside, convincing herself it was just the thrill of the unknown. Little did she know, she was stepping into a nightmare from which there would be no escape. The night was dark, with clouds veiling the moon, as Emily drove up the long, winding road leading to Shadow House. The closer she got, the more the air seemed to thicken with an eerie silence. Even the wind seemed to avoid this place. Finally, the house came into view, an ancient, decaying mansion standing alone on a hill. Its windows were like dark eyes staring back at her, full of malice. The front door creaked open by itself, as if the house had been waiting for her. A shiver ran down Emily's spine, but she forced herself to step inside. The air inside was cold, and the musty smell of decay filled her nose. Shadows danced on the walls, and the house seemed to breathe as if alive. Yet there was no sign of life, no host, no other guests, just an unsettling stillness. She explored the house, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Each room was filled with dusty furniture and faded portraits, their eyes following her every move. In the center of the house was a grand staircase, leading up to the second floor. As she climbed the stairs, the temperature dropped, and she could feel the cold breath of something unseen on the back of her neck. Emily settled into the guest room, trying to push away her fear. But as the night deepened, strange things began to happen. At first it was just small noises, the creak of a floorboard, the whisper of the wind. But soon it became clear that she was not alone. At midnight, the temperature plummeted, and a thick fog filled the room. Emily's breath caught in her throat as a shadowy figure appeared in the corner. It was tall, with long, twisted limbs and hollow eyes that seemed to see into her soul. She tried to move, but her body was frozen with terror. The figure whispered her name in a voice that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving Emily shaking and drenched in cold sweat. She wanted to leave, but the front door wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself had locked her in. Desperate, she tried calling for help, but her phone was dead, and there was no signal. Panic set in as she realized she was trapped. The second night was worse. The house seemed to come alive, with doors slamming on their own and ghostly figures appearing in mirrors. Every shadow seemed to hide something sinister. Emily could feel the house feeding on her fear, growing stronger with each passing hour. She tried to stay awake, but exhaustion overtook her. In her dreams, she saw horrifying visions: blood-stained walls, mutilated bodies, and a dark, twisted figure chasing her through endless corridors. When she woke up, the nightmares followed her into the waking world. Emily discovered a hidden diary in the attic, written by a previous guest. The entries described similar experiences: unseen presences, terrifying visions, and an overwhelming sense of dread. The final entry was a chilling warning: the house will take your soul. Leave before it's too late. Desperation drove Emily to explore the basement, hoping to find an exit or a way to break the house's curse. As she descended into the darkness, the walls seemed to close in around her. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the silence was broken only by the sound of her own heartbeat. In the deepest part of the basement, she found an old wooden door, sealed with rusted chains. Something told her that whatever was behind that door was the source of the house's evil. But as she reached out to touch the door, a voice in her head screamed for her to stop. Ignoring the warning, she broke the chains and opened the door. Inside was a small, dark room filled with ancient symbols and a single, rotting book on a pedestal. The book was bound in human skin, and as she opened it, she realized it was a grimoire, a book of dark magic. The pages described rituals for summoning demons and binding souls. Shadow House was not just haunted. It was cursed by the evil rituals performed by its original owner, a twisted sorcerer who had trapped the souls of his victims within the house for all eternity. Emily knew she had to destroy the book to end the curse, but as she prepared to burn it, the house fought back. The walls trembled and ghostly figures clawed at her, trying to stop her. The shadowy figure from her first night reappeared, its hollow eyes burning with rage. With every ounce of strength, Emily set the book on fire. The flames spread quickly, engulfing the room. As the book burned, the house screamed, a terrible, inhuman sound that shook the very ground beneath her. The ghostly figures vanished and the air became still. For a moment, it seemed like the nightmare was over. But as Emily tried to escape, the house began to collapse around her. She ran through the halls, dodging falling debris, but the front door remained sealed. Trapped and choking on smoke, she realized the house had one final trick. It wouldn't let her go. The curse wasn't just in the book, it was in the very walls of Shadow House. As the flames consumed the house, Emily's screams echoed through the night. The house, now fully awakened, devoured her, trapping her soul within its walls like all those who had come before her. The fire eventually died out, but Shadow House remained, untouched by the flames, as if nothing had happened. In a quiet village, there lived an old woman named Sarah. She had a strange mirror in her house. The villagers said the mirror was cursed, but Sarah never believed them. She bought it from a dark, dusty shop many years ago. One night, as Sarah cleaned the mirror, she noticed something odd. Her reflection didn't move. It just stared back at her with cold, empty eyes. Sarah felt a chill, but she thought it was just her imagination. She went to bed, but strange noises filled the house. A faint whisper echoed from the mirror, calling her name. Terrified, Sarah covered the mirror with a cloth, hoping the noises would stop, but the whispers grew louder. Suddenly, the cloth fell off, and Sarah saw a shadowy figure inside the mirror, grinning wickedly. The figure stepped out of the mirror and stood in front of her. Sarah screamed, but no one heard her. The figure looked exactly like her, but its eyes were dark, empty pits. It whispered, "Your soul is mine now." Before Sarah could run, the figure grabbed her and pulled her into the mirror. The next morning, the villagers found Sarah's house empty. The only thing left was the mirror, but now it had a new reflection. Sarah, trapped inside, her eyes filled with terror, silently screaming for help. The villagers say that if you stare into the mirror too long, you might see Sarah, and if you do, the cursed figure might come for you next.